Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to a regular session of the GID. As we all know, the Town of Snowmass Village Council comprises the GID board. So with that, I'll call the meeting to order. Rhonda, roll call.
Butler.
Here.
Circus.
Here.
Matson. Shank. Good.
Here.
Okay. So this evening on our agenda for the Snowmass Village General Improvement District Number 1, there are two resolutions. The first being a resolution amending the 2018 budget for the GID, and the second amendment will be a resolution summarizing revenues and expenditures for the GID of the Town of Snowmass Village, and then we'll be looking at the 2019 for that particular resolution. Marianne, you want to go ahead and provide information about what's going on?
You bet. The resolution number 1 has to do with the 2018 budget, and we are revising that budget, and we are revising it. Interest income is up by around $5,000, and then there's a couple of changes in the expenditures. The consultant that we were looking to hire to evaluate the SkyCab and other options, we're moving that $50,000 from 18 into 2019. And then under capital for SkyCab repairs and maintenance, the ski company informed us that some tower line bushings needed to be replaced. I don't know what they are, but it's $16,000. They were hoping to get about $8,000 of it done this year and another $8,000 next year. So those are the changes for 2018. 2019 budget, which is the resolution number 2, that the property taxes are increasing by 10.3%. That's the revenue.
Okay, so
the
that
mill levy is staying the same at 6 mills.
So the 257 is because of that change in the tax valuation.
That
Property
it went
tax,
up.
okay.
The assessed value went up by 10.31%.
And can you tell me what specific ownership on taxes? What's that?
That's when you register your car.
Oh.
And so whoever collects property taxes also gets remitted back the specific ownership. The town and the GID both do.
Okay.
Marianne, what entities are included in the GID, or John?
You mean what work do we do? What services do we provide?
Who pays the tax?
Base Village.
So is it commercial and residential?
The other changes, or the other items in the 2019 budget are the $50,000 that moved from 18 to 19 for the consultant, and the SkyCab operating costs. In the summer of 2018, the operating hours were from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., and now the ski company sent us a letter and said that they're going to start the gondola this summer at 9 a.m., so we've adjusted our budget to cover from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., so they're consistent. And then under the capital, again, is the $8,000 for the tower line bushings, that second phase of that project. And we've also added, because there seems to be these maintenance issues that come up more and more often, we've added $10,000 a year to cover any of those expenses that may pop up.
I was going to ask you if the consultant had been retained.
They haven't. That's the project we hope to go in partnership with SkiCo, the developer, or somebody else. We don't think it should be dollars that the GID picks up by itself.
Okay.
And so we're still working to develop those partnerships with other folks. And I think we've had conversations. I know last year that you guys got a little update on some of the numbers that some SkiCo staff ran on some improvements that could happen to the Skittles lift itself. So we have some ballpark ideas and continue to have those discussions, but we have not retained, with hopes that we get the partnerships developed first.
I have a couple of budget questions. Do we want to take care of the first resolution first, or?
Are you in 2019 or 2018?
These are in, well, they're, I guess, in both.
Well, why don't we go ahead and ask?
Okay. So one thing was, on the, on these bearings that seem to be, well, that we had to repair. I guess it's a technical question, Mary Ann, but are these bearings a depreciable asset?
I don't know.
I can't believe so.
I can't believe so
No, I
either.
know.
So then my point is, why is it then under a capital account rather than part of the maintenance costs?
We can move it up to the maintenance cost line.
It was just,
It just,
the size of the project. It's one of those things that we rely on SKICO. We have a contract with them to provide that service. They call us up and say, hey, so you know, ABC work needs to be done. We trust that ABC work needs to be
Yeah.
done. They couldn't get it all done this year. They said, we're gonna split it over 2 years. We said, great, we'll have the dollars available to get it done.
well, I mean,
Yeah.
that's
For us-
fine. I'm only asking because if there
We
was,
don't, it's a government, we don't depreciate, we're not gonna get a depreciation,
Right.
any kind of benefit, so it's easier for us to put under capital,
because it's easier to see it?
we can point it out that way, and it doesn't get buried in a budget.
Okay, but I have a concern that the reserve balance, the fund balance is
Shrinking.
shrinking, and it appears that it will continue to shrink about $50,000 a year.
And you gotta remember, so we don't have, base villages, or GID is all a base village, it's a property tax.
Yeah,
The assessed value of that will go up considerably over the next several years. And with Limelight 4, 7, 8 getting completed, other buildings, and so, we expect that to balance out going forward.
but that's not,
We don't have that
but that's
shown
not
yet.
really factored in here as yet,
Correct.
correct?
We have not factored that additional revenue in that as yet, correct. And so, we don't know what that assessed value is gonna be yet going forward.
Yeah.
Rather than guessing, we showed it conservative this way, but we have every expectation that the total assessed value will go up in future years, and that balance of the revenues and expenses will be hit. We have the exact same observation you do, and we're gonna pay very close attention to it.
We had the
Okay.
same discussion for 10 years on the GID.
Well, it looks better this year than
Yeah.
it's looked in a long time.
And
Yeah,
it'll
sure
look
did.
better next year than it'll ever look before.
Yep. Back in their session, it was like, oh, gosh.
Well, before they got COs, it was really, oh gosh.
So do you have any other questions?
No, I think that's probably,
Okay, do I have a motion for
Oh,
approval of
oh.
GID resolution? Oops.
sorry, I got one more, and it's.
See,
it's-
can never take his
Okay, okay.
answers
Um,
as truthful.
So,
I'm just kidding.
when the GID was established, I guess that was the point in time when SKICO was tasked with paying for the Skittles, or contributing towards the Skittles during the winter months, right? That's kind
That's
of,
how I understand it, yes.
that's as I understand it. So,
The summer months is what the GID
Controls.
pays for.
okay.
And after 4 o'clock.
And after 4 o'clock.
During the winter.
Okay, but now we're moving forward, we have a different kind of summer program. We have extended hours on the gondola, we have the Lost Forest up at the top, and even for the next summer, the GID is making a change to the typical hours of the Skittles to match the gondola hours.
Correct.
So I guess my question really is, who as the GID entity would be the appropriate person to begin the negotiation on a change to the financing of the summer hours?
be me. I'd have to go back and review the actual agreement that we've got. Can't remember if it's contractual or not. It is contractual?
Yeah.
And so it would be a renegotiation of the contract. I mean, I think some of the things that are on my mind are, we pay different rates when the gondola is running and not running. I think there's after hours, those types of things. I think
Yeah.
those would be certainly fair issues to bring up, to understand how those new costs are being allocated. And I think we can commit to having those discussions and ensure that they're fair. I don't know that we get to go back and open up a contract that's set, but I think we can ask for some clarity on how we got here and see if there's other ways we can partner more effectively.
Okay, I mean, I just think,
We don't want to keep going forward because we've always done it this way. I'm putting words in your mouth. but I
yeah,
think
that's right.
Let's
I
look
mean,
at it again and make sure it's fair and right and
Yeah,
going forward.
yeah,
The mill levy is controlled by contract, so there's not, you as a GID board can't say, oh, well, we don't have enough money, we're gonna change that mill levy from 6, because that's a contractual
Right.
obligation. And there are bondholders out there that are relying on that situation. So, as far as, I would call it rent that the ski company pays to use it, that is something that Clint could renegotiate, but not the underlying structure of the bonds at this point.
okay.
So, do I have a motion for approval of resolution number 1 of series of 2018?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in support?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Now let's look at the 2019 resolution number 2, series of 2018. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tom.
I'll just let you guys keep with the same thing.
Speak up anytime you want now, listen.
Okay. Are there any further questions? If not, all in support?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, that has approved. And now we have minutes for approval. Do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes from 2017, December the 11th?
I'll motion to approve the minutes from 2017.
Thank you, Alyssa. Do I have a second?
I wasn't here, so I probably can't second.
No, you
Yes,
can't.
you were.
You read the minutes, so you can second
Well, I
it.
read the minutes, but I wasn't here at the meeting, so I couldn't
I'll
tell.
second.
Okay, Tom's going to do it. Okay,
I'll
thank you.
second it.
All in support?
I was
Aye.
here
Aye.
too, but who can remember that far?
I know, I looked at the minute. I'm like, what was I doing?
We know Bob is a diligent member of the GID board.
Oh, we
Watch
know.
the video, so he can certainly comment on
Good old
the
Bob.
minutes.
Okay, we are going to take a recess until Rhonda gets
Do we have
everything.
to adjourn, officially
Yes,
adjourn?
yeah, I'm sorry.
Motion to adjourn the
Technically,
GID
I
meeting.
really don't have to.
Oh, you don't?
I learned that from
Okay.
Pitkin County, but guess what? Thank you for doing that, because that's the way we do things in Snowmass.
Yes, right.
So we are adjourned, and for about 5 minutes, Rhonda?
Not even that long.
Okay.
let's talk about,
Tobacco. Are we
Vaping.
ready to go over there?
Yep.
Okay. Well, we are now in a work session, and this is Town Council. This evening on our work agenda is a discussion regarding raising age to purchase cigarettes in Snowmass Village to 21. And then we'll talk about Building 6, and then reviewing the grant criteria. And this evening, we're going to welcome Risa, who is a family nurse practitioner and has her master's also in public health and works for our wonderful Picken County Health Department. So, and everybody knows Brian.
you do?
Yeah.
Socially, not necessarily professionally.
Lisa, before you start, Rhonda, can you maybe walk us through kind of how we got here and then we can come back?
Okay, a few, I don't know, a month or so ago, I think it was Bill Mattson asked that we look into raising the age of the purchasing tobacco products, not just cigarettes, because you've got e-cigarettes and all of the other things, so we call them tobacco products, to the age of 21. Now, we have 4 different areas in Colorado who have done this: Aspen, Avon, Basalt, and Carbondale. Carbondale just raised theirs, I think the ordinance passed in July of 18, and they are going to be meeting again tomorrow. They don't have any licensing at this time. From the information that I gathered and collected, if we are changing it from the state, then we have to do the licensing within the municipality, and they would no longer do stings, and they would not do the $10 a year license. It would be done through the municipality. So I collected the information from the other 4 entities, and I went through the ordinances and read them as best as I can, and I went through all of our locations within the town, and we do have 4 areas that sell tobacco products and 2 locations that have vending machines. And that's what we have right now in the town of Snowmass Village. Basically, they're paying $10 right now for their tobacco license. I don't know what you guys are looking at, but I did put down the prices that everybody else is paying, which is up in the 500s, and that's annual, for Avon and Aspen, and then a $275 for Basalt. And as I said, Carbondale has not done anything at this time, so. I attached I got some information too, and I did attach all of the information that Risa sent me, and I did put in all of those states and localities that are at the age of 21 for you, and then all of the, basically all of the ordinances from the other municipalities. Brian's here because I mentioned it in a staff meeting, and, well, if we're going to have, I don't know what we're gonna do because you guys haven't decided, but he would be involved in, the process of
Compliance check.
the
part of
compliance
it.
check part of it. And basically, we just need you take a look at all the information and decide how you want to go further. But Risa is here to give us a presentation, and the presentation that you asked for, they're both the same. So I just had Risa come, so I'll turn it over to her for now.
Thank you. Oh, I have 2.
You're that important, Risa. Can you feel-
Yeah, I don't know.
Stereo.
You can tell me after the presentation. So I do have a presentation. Rhonda, I went through the packet and I had a couple of things that I may understand a little differently. Can I mention them now?
Sure, absolutely.
So in terms of compliance checks by the state FDA and Department of Revenue currently do compliance checks where they bring in an underage person and they get them to try to buy a tobacco product. And if that doesn't work, great. And if the minor is able to buy a tobacco product, then that's considered a violation. Those compliance checks will continue even if the age is raised, but they will continue to be for less than 18. So then the town itself is responsible for the between 18 to 21 checks. Avon, there's a couple changes to Avon from what's in your packet. One is that they do prohibit self-service, so vending machines are not allowed in Avon. And after some discussion in the second reading, they dropped the license fee to $250 rather than $500. considering a burden on local businesses. I guess there's some fee that you're paying to the state. We weren't aware of any $10 state license fee, but I guess there's something
Well,
there.
that's what all of the individual retail locations told me. Sundance, and the same with Snowmass Conoco, they pay a $10 fee and get a little license from the state.
That's interesting, because I asked our state policy technical assistance person, and she wasn't aware of a state fee. So it might be that they're paying something for the We Card. You know, there's that little sign that says We Card, and that's actually provided by the tobacco industry. They may be paying something for that.
She said it's from the state.
Gonna look into that even further. We'll find out. I'll let you know. And then there's some mention of the state shareback, which is the percentage of tobacco tax that comes back to municipalities. And I just wanted to make sure that it's clear that Avon, Aspen, and Basalt have foregone their shareback completely. Carbondale's the only one that maintains their shareback, and the shareback, the language can be a little bit unclear, and it seems to be changing over time as the tobacco industry sees more municipalities going to Tobacco 21, that they're pressuring the state to be a little bit more strict on who loses their share back. But the language as we read it, and as it's been read so far, is that if there's any license put in place by a municipality, or if there's any tax placed on cigarettes, then the municipality loses that share back. And so what Avon, Aspen, and Basalt have done is to place a tax, in which case they're actually getting back multiples of what they were getting from the share back before, which was not the intention. The intention was to get back exactly what they were getting before, but with the addition of e-cigarettes, and I guess a small miscalculation where they thought that they were getting a percentage of the total tax, but they were actually only getting a percentage of the original tax from the original legislation. So that's
Clear then for us, since we're not considering a new tax, we would likely lose that $15,000 a year.
if you considered a tobacco retail license or
Which
a
is how we have
tax.
to enforce, that's the only way we have to enforce between 18 and 21 is through a license.
For most municipalities, yeah. Carbondale chose not to go with a license. So they're regulating.
So they'll continue to get the tax?
They
share back?
actually do continue to get the tax. If another municipality decided to do what Carbondale did now, it may be read differently, just because it's been a little bit more time. But Carbondale still gets their share back. Yeah. And the way that they're dealing with it is they're doing compliance checks, and they have a pretty hefty fee for the retail locations.
And all of their compliance information was usually at the end of each ordinance, and some of the fees do get hefty and up there. Now, I took Avon's right off their website, so must be they don't have it updated.
They didn't update it. We actually had to check back with them to find out what the most recent is. Yeah. Okay. So if there's no questions on that, I'm just going to carry on. I just have a short presentation, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. So before I start, I have only been here for a couple of months. I'm here from New York via Africa. So if I totally get something wrong about the area, please forgive me and correct me, because I'm still learning. Still learning. Okay.
Is it not working? Darn it.
I can just sit next to the computer. Sure, that'd be great. Does that work?
Probably an arrow.
I just do it from memory.
Yeah. There we go.
You want to try that again, Risa?
Perfect. Okay, so just some statistics to start with. 95% of current smokers were smokers before the age of 21, which is why we're talking about tobacco products being sold to people under 21. And having the first cigarette by age 18 doubles your chance of being a lifetime smoker. tobacco has gone down so much in the past 20 years because cigarettes are no longer cool. People understand their risks, and tobacco use is so far down among our high school youth, but it's on the rise again in the past few years simply because of vaping products. In this valley, so from Aspen to Parachute, if we look at the data from the most recent Healthy Kids survey, 35% of high school students in our valley said that they used a vape product. And we know from the schools that what they're seeing in the bathrooms and in the halls is that there's been a big increase even since 2017. And so a recent Carbondale statistics class in the high school did an excellent survey of their peers, and they found that it was closer to 40%, and that was last year. So we're looking at probably closer to 50% this year have used a vape product in the past month. And then over 12% of middle school students have tried a vape product, and that, of course, increases. That's the average for 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So today I want to talk a little bit about nicotine addiction in the teenage brain, and then talk about the facts of vaping a little bit. I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page about vaping. We'll talk a little bit about what's happening here and policy considerations. And I just need to qualify that I am funded by the state program, which is under Amendment 35, which is the tobacco tax. So part of our 100% of my salary comes from that grant for Pitkin County. So I'm only able to provide education and no advocacy. So that's what this presentation will be about. So as you know, I'm a nurse practitioner, so I think a lot about the health of our teenagers. And one of the things that concerns me the most about tobacco is that the teenage brain is still developing until the age of 25. And the main part that's still developing is that frontal cortex, which determines how youth deal with impulse control, learning, focus, and concentration. And nicotine itself is pretty disruptive to the way that the brain develops those synapses and communication channels. Thank you. And so it actually disrupts the way that those synapses and communication channels are being developed. So over time, it can affect young people's brain and the way that they focus, learn, and retain knowledge. But also in the moment, we know that young people are vaping in the bathrooms now, A, because they're addicted to nicotine, and B, because it's really easy to get into the schools. And so that nicotine hit during the class day is affecting their ability to focus and learn. And then the other thing that is really concerning, and you'll see in the next slide, I'm going to show you a quote, is that the adolescent brain is particularly vulnerable to addiction. And so as the nicotine lights up all of those dopamine receptors decide that they like nicotine better than dopamine. And so over time, kids become addicted to nicotine, and I'm not calling it a gateway drug, but it does potentially make them more able to be addicted to other things in the future. So whether that's other drugs, whether that's cigarettes, or whether that's skydiving, it could be those things. And so this is something that the tobacco industry is quite aware of. 9 out of 10 current adult smokers first use their cigarettes by the age of 18. And when we look at 99% of current adult smokers, they started by the time they were 26. I believe the U.S. Surgeon General requested this report from the Institute of Medicine about what would happen if we did increase the minimum age from 18 to 21. And what they found was that in that key 15 to 17-year-old age group, you're going to get a decreased initiation rate of almost 25%. And that's big. When we look at the quote that I just mentioned, where 9 out of 10 kids who start smoking are starting before they're 18 and then continuing to smoke, that's a really big decrease. And then we see even a 15% decrease in youth under 15 and between 18 and 20 years old. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about what is vaping. Those might look like cigarettes to you, but they're actually electronic cigarettes that these girls are trying out today. So the electronic cigarette is essentially a cigarette, but we have a little LED indicator to give the same idea of the light up at the end of the cigarette when somebody takes a puff. And it has a rechargeable battery these days. They used to be a little bit different, but now we have a rechargeable battery. And down here at the bottom, that's where the nicotine cartridge is placed. And so they used to be disposable, but now they're refillable. So you just buy a new cartridge. It has the vape juice or the electronic cigarette juice or the liquid nicotine, and it has the nicotine in that place. And then, oops, just above there, you see the little heating coil, and so that heats it, creates it into what we could call an aerosol, and then it's inhaled this way. And so what's in it? And every vape product is going to have a slightly different component, and every different flavor of vape product is going to have different chemicals in it. But essentially, the most important ones to think about are the nicotine and then all of the chemicals that go into making a flavor. And when I talk to the kids at the middle school about it, I say, you know, if you look at the back of a bag of Cool Ranch Doritos, there's a million ingredients on there, and those are the things that make up the flavors. And we know that a lot of them are carcinogenic, and we know that a lot of them are things that we maybe or maybe don't consider safe for ingestion, but we have no idea what happens when you breathe it into your lungs. We know that there's other heavy metals, ultrafine particles, and several other things depending on the brand. And there's been a whole host of different types of e-cigarettes and e-pipes created. The most common right now are these rechargeable e-cigarettes, and I'm going to show you a picture of the Juul, which has captured about 70% of the youth market. I mean, if you look at it, it looks sort of like an iPhone package. It captures this whole techie, sleek, colorful packaging that a lot of the technology companies have also adopted. It also looks a lot like a flash drive. And so this is part of the reason that kids are able to use it without anybody noticing. It also doesn't create that cloud of smoke that was ubiquitous among vape products. It's now just pretty silent and not noticeable.
Is Juul a brand name or?
Juul is a brand. Juul is the only major e-cigarette that is not owned by the big tobacco company. It's owned by Pax Labs, which started out by making a marijuana vape device that looks almost exactly like this.
So are these commercially available online?
They're available online.
Anywhere.
They're available online, and they're available at most convenience stores, supermarkets. They're not, the Juul itself is not being sold at the vape shops, but it's being sold mostly at regular places where people buy cigarettes.
But isn't it true with the online stuff that even though they may ask you that you have to agree that you're over 18, the kids can still get through, and that's how they're buying them? I saw a special on.
Yeah, and a lot of times what I'm hearing here, what kids are doing is that they're going and they're buying a $50 gift card, and then they're using that gift card to buy online so they don't have to go through some of the age walls. There was an announcement by the FDA that they are planning to announce some restrictions to online buying that also requires some delivery receipt, but I don't know how they're going to do that. So the online buying is definitely a problem.
So you can buy either nicotine or marijuana products online?
No, not the
I don't think you can
marijuana.
buy the marijuana online,
Not the marijuana, just that it's nicotine.
just the nicotine.
Jesus Christ.
And
There was a NPR thing this afternoon on Marketplace. The FDA is getting very involved in the vaping and tobacco products now. They're talking about it'll take until 2022 to get the FDA having to approve these products.
You know, it's really interesting because the FDA has been giving the electronic cigarette companies waivers, and the reason is that the tobacco industry wanted to be able to do some studies and prove that e-cigarettes were healthier than traditional cigarettes. So they could put that on the package. This is healthier, this is a good alternative, use this to quit smoking. My understanding is that the research studies haven't panned out yet, and so they've been getting additional 5-year waivers.
They were talking about that on.
And so their waiver right now, I think, goes till 2020, but about a month and a half ago, and I think my dates are right, about a month and a half ago, the FDA asked the top 5 e-cigarette producing companies to come up with a plan for how they're going to stop targeting kids. But this announcement on Friday looks like it might be a little bit even more strict than that, that they're going to try to ban flavors from being sold at convenience stores and supermarkets.
Yeah, that's what I was reading
Look at
about
this.
the flavors, because the flavors are the
Cool
most
Mac
attractive.
Virginia Tobacco Cream Brulee.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, right, so like, I just It's just really hard for us as, people working in this field to understand how creme brulee and gummy bears and cotton candy are the flavors that are being used to help people who have been smoking for 40 years get off cigarettes. Like, we could more understand a tobacco flavor, but it's really hard to understand some of these flavors that seem like only kids would want them. Yeah, you guys have good questions. So these little pods over here on the left, that is the refillable nicotine and vape juice that goes into the top of that Juul. Within one of those pods, what Juul says is that it's the equivalent nicotine to 1 pack of cigarettes, and there's about 200 puffs to get through one of those. And one of the things that's concerning is that if somebody smokes a traditional cigarette, they know when they get to the end, right? And they go, okay, that's my cigarette for this, morning or whatever. But when you're inhaling from a vape device, you have no idea, unless you're counting your puffs, and nobody counts how many puffs or drags or rips they're taking. Also, that estimate of each pod being equivalent to 1 pack of cigarettes, that's from Juul's website, but these products are they are not very regulated, and so we don't have a really good idea of exactly how much nicotine is in each one. This new warning label, this is brand new, maybe like 6 months old. Up until now, there hadn't been any warning labels on the Juul devices. And so we talked a little bit about the flavors, and then the other methods of marketing that don't look exactly like they're being used for 40-year smokers are some of these young, sexy, attractive ads. And then also, if you see the one down on the left that says "Love Your Lungs," there's this marketing towards an active lifestyle and how this might be healthier, even though we don't have the data for that yet. So I want to switch and talk a little bit about our local data. I talked a little bit about this when we first started. Looking at specifically the Aspen School District and Roaring Fork Valley youth, so that is Aspen to Parachute. And then the state data. So the yellow bar, so this is from the Healthy Kids Colorado survey from 2017. And each school gets to decide which questions they ask. And if there isn't enough data, then they suppress the answers. So you'll see that there are zeros, but that may just be that they didn't ask the question. So the yellow bar, the first one is Aspen Middle School. The next 3 are all high school level. So the orange bar is Aspen High School. The red bar is the Roaring Fork Valley together high schools, and the purple bar is at the state level, the average for high schools. And so when we look at smoking cigarettes versus the third section, which is using e-cigarettes in the past 30 days, we can see that there's a big difference among youth use. And I just wanted to point out the way that youth define their access to cigarettes. And so we asked them, do you think that if you could buy cigarettes yourself, would it be easy for you to get? And so we can see that 70% of Aspen High School students say, yeah, I could just go get my own cigarettes. And when we look at easy access, we don't have, Aspen didn't ask that question, so we have for Roaring Fork Valley, like 62% said it would be easy for them to get cigarettes by themselves, which is a little bit higher than the state. And so then they also asked, can you buy your own tobacco product? Do you think if you walked into the store, you'd be able to buy your own product? And 24% of less than 18-year-olds in the Roaring Fork Valley said, sure, I actually do buy my own cigarettes, my own e-cigarettes, sorry. And 62% of less than 18-year-old smokers said that they buy their own cigarettes. So that's current smokers who said that they do smoke, whether or not they buy their own. So when we think about policy, we have a few things to think about. We're really excited that November 2nd, the governor came out and said that he's declaring this No Vape November, which also came with some policy recommendations. And the driver for this was that Colorado ranked #1 out of the 37 states that did the Healthy Kids survey in rate of youth vaping. And so #1 is not really where you want to be if you're the state. And it was actually double the national average of kids who said that they had ever vaped. And so what the governor put out was this prevention blueprint, and he said, or the office said, there are 6 things that we would recommend. One is to extend the excise tax beyond just cigarettes to include e-cigarettes, or to impose a fee. So it's in some way increasing the price of these e-cigarette devices. Currently, statewide, there is no tax on e-cigarettes, so it's kind of talking about evening the playing ground. To require retail licensing, to require some kind of age verification for online buying, like we were saying, as well as the governor's office recommended some sort of delivery verification, so that when the package is received, somebody also says, I'm over 21 and I wanted this to come. To update the Colorado Clean Air Act, which Snowmass has already done, to include vaping devices, to raise the minimum age to 21, and to prohibit the sale of flavors, since it's considered one of the big draws for young people. And so Needham is I guess, a suburb of Boston, and they were the very first municipality to make this Tobacco 21 change. And so they've been a really good case study for us. And one of the things that's very interesting to me about Needham, and I think relevant to this community, is that kids could literally walk across the street and they would be in a different district, and the policy was 18. And so the fact that it made a difference at all is impressive, and the fact that it dropped youth smoking rates by 48.1% is incredible, I think. So you can see the top line is neighboring areas, and the dotted line is Needham, and they phased in their Tobacco 21. So the first year they raised it to 19, the second year they raised it to 20, the third year they raised it to 21. I think they were worried about current smokers, but this is what they did, and by 2010 they showed a 48% decrease. And when the studies were done to look at why, the answer was no more social source of tobacco. So if you think about a 16-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 14-year-old, they may have somebody in their high school who's over 18 who can be their provider of tobacco products. Much harder for a 14, 15, 16-year-old, even an 18-year-old, to have a 21-year-old who's continuously around and can be their continuous supplier of tobacco products. And so now we know that over 320 cities and 4 states have decided to make the switch from 18 to 21. Several cities and towns across the country have gone with that switch. In a study in 2015 looking at general public approval of the idea of going to Tobacco 21, over 70% of people across the country said yes, that they would support that. And so I wanted to present to you some of the suggested components of an ordinance from the Public Health Law Center. And I tried to break it down into 3 components. We actually would consider it 4, but I'll show you that in a second. So the 3 main ones are setting the sale age to 21, having a license, and that license is kind of your overall framework. Like you said, that's how you're able to enforce the age at 21. Otherwise, sometimes it's just words on the ordinance. And then it's the enforcement. So it's somehow doing the compliance checks and making sure that there's meaningful fines and the ability to suspend or revoke that license. And I think that's where the issue with the retail license really comes in, is that ability to revoke it if there are multiple violations. And I'm sorry, I wanted to double check the violations in Snowmass Village. I know that there's at least 1 in the last 3 years, but I think there are 2 for under 18 sales, but please don't hold me to that. I need to check that. Our website's having some problems.
And how long, the last 2 years?
Since 2016, since mid-2016. There's been 1, thank you. We have 2, but I think that there's a problem with our system. So the 4th component, so I would say the 3 components are Tobacco 21, the retail license, and the enforcement, but the 4th one are particularly vulnerable populations, including pregnant women, Blacks, Hispanics, and lower income workers. And so in addition to the 3 or 4 components, the other additional components that kind of round out or strengthen your policy include a strong definition of tobacco, which really means including e-cigarettes very clearly, which, like I said, you've already done in your smoke-free policies. Having some sort of age verification required. Having signage in the shop, so essentially saying there's a sign that says we only sell tobacco to people under 21, so it reinforces that. And then education of retailers is twofold. So one is having something in your policy or your ordinance that says we will educate those retailers before we go out and do compliance checks. And so that's generally built in as an opportunity to not make it punitive, but to make it an opportunity for them to do the right thing. The other bit of education about retailers, I said that WE card is produced by the tobacco industry. We know that WE card also comes with a training for retailers, and that training has just been shown to be less effective than some other trainings. And there's a state training that if you were to write a retail license in, you could also require some kind of a proper training for retailers and for, like, specifically for clerks, so that they know how to ID somebody and they know how to deal with it. If somebody comes in and they're not 21, like, how to explain that. And then setting up your effective date a little bit in advance so that you can prepare for what's coming. We know that current Colorado laws aren't working great, so we already talked about a lot of this. Youth who are attempting to buy are being sold tobacco products. A high percentage of our kids in the Valley are saying that it's easy to get tobacco products. And something that I didn't mention is that the state checks, they only check half of retailers every year. So it's kind of an every 2-year cycle, unless there's a violation, in which case they go back. So like Rhonda mentioned, we have 4 municipalities in Colorado who have a comprehensive tobacco retail license, meaning that it includes cigarettes. That's Aspen, Basalt, Edgewater, and now Avon. 7 municipalities in Colorado have a non-cigarette tobacco retail license. I think, and this was before I got here, but I think probably to avoid losing that share back. And so Aspen, Basalt, and Avon created a tax initiative to cover that loss of share back. And so I just put it on a table to highlight really quickly that I'd say most of the municipalities have gone with almost all 4 major prongs. Aspen wrote in some optional enforcement piece. So for the compliance checks, it's optional if they decide to do them. For Basalt, they went with all 4 components. For Carbondale, they're doing great enforcement in terms of compliance checks, but they don't have the retail license, so they don't have that prong of the enforcement piece. And Avon, again, went with all 4 prongs. And that's all I have for you today, but I'm more than happy to answer questions if you have any.
Brian, what do you see some of the challenges to be?
I mean, I would be in support of getting rid of the vending machines for sure.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the Mountain Dragon, the Slow Groovin', thank you, is down their hall by the bathrooms and not monitored at all if it's still in the same place it's been for 30 years. Zane's is right by their bar, but still the vending machines I think are just a big leak. And I know I'm pretty sure Aspen got rid of theirs, and I just think that's a no-brainer. You know, I liken this to the alcohol challenge. You know, we out of our police department train tips, we train the bartenders, we have that relationship with the establishment. You know, the state comes in and does alcohol checks, and we actually, when they come in to do cigarette checks, we participate with them, because the fact that they're actually using a juvenile to affect these stings, they ask us to stand by when they're doing that, so we're kind of around when that happens. I'll be honest with you, I'm not in favor of doing compliance checks. I'm okay with putting it in the ordinance and using it if we find it's necessary, but again, just like tips training, we train our bartenders, we have for my entire career out of our office, and or played a significant role in it, and we don't sting the bars either. I mean, there's a reason to maintain a healthy, trusting relationship, and I think education and regular check-ins from time to time is a much better way to maintain the health of this ordinance change. And if that doesn't work, I'll eat crow and go in a different direction. But I really don't look favorably of building a relationship with our retailers where they know I'm actually there sneaking around attempting to put them in a bad way. And I probably hate cigarette smoking more than anybody there is. I disdain it big time, don't like it. Especially having a 17-year-old and hoping that never goes his way. But I do think that we can still be extremely successful in raising this age to 21 and using everything at our fingertips and maybe just holding back on compliance checks unless we absolutely see that the other is not being effective.
So you'd make that optional within any ordinance?
Yeah, I think it's fair to put it in there, you know, because, I mean, there could be a situation, but where we'd have to revert to that. But I think we can stay out ahead of it with education and with relationships, and that will be a more productive Snowmass style eventuality.
And a compliance check doesn't necessarily have to be a sting. You can just check for signage too, and that they have their cigarettes behind the counter where they're supposed to be.
That's the relationship check-in part that I would refer to. It's the sting part of it, the undercover aspect of it that I'm just not a fan of in this small community that we haven't had to go down that road to begin with. I'm happy to have the state come up and do it to their heart's content. I know they're only doing it up to age 18, so that's not completely effective, but it still would be helpful, and I'll let them have that, and we'll attack it from every other angle.
So was it Aspen that had optional on their
Yeah, I don't know exactly how it's written, but I think it's optional. The only, and Brian, I agree with you and don't know this town very well, and so I understand the hesitation for compliance checks. The only thing that I would note about that is that in Carbondale, they have 10 tobacco retailers. And 2 of them recently failed the under 18 compliance checks, and 4 out of the 10 failed their under 21 compliance checks immediately after the under 18 sting was done. One of them failed both times. It's the 7-Eleven, which the 7-Eleven in Basalt failed too. It's a company that we know often has a reputation for doing that, but 4 out of 10 is a lot.
So I guess the question that I would pose for all of us to think about, we have a pretty high rate of our Aspen kids having access and easy access to buy cigarettes. So how can we, price doesn't matter to a lot of these kids. Question is, how can we get to a point where we don't have 65 or 64% or 38% of middle school?
I like the getting rid of the flavors. I mean, I just don't see any good reason for that. If cigarettes are beginning to be on the decline and really the focus is becoming the e-cigarette, getting rid of the flavors is also, I think, would be effective right off the bat.
The other thing, I'm not 100% sure about this, I need to check, but I think you can ban the sale of Juuls. There are some companies that don't sell Juul. There's a gas station, the Basalt I don't know what it's called. The Basalt gas
Basalt
station,
General
but
Store?
not the one next to Whole Food in Willits, the one in Basalt
The
Town.
Basalt store.
I think that's it, thank you.
They sell Juuls?
They do not sell Juuls, and they also have a store in Aspen, and the owner said he just won't sell Juuls because he has kids in high school and middle school.
Are
So
there
they don't sell
other,
Juuls.
e-cigarette companies selling flavored product?
Yes.
Can you ask that again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, are there other e-cigarette companies that are selling flavored product besides Juul?
Yes, they're all the e-cigarette companies are selling flavored products. A lot of the e-cigarettes that are sold by the standard tobacco companies are required. So if you want to sell Marlboro cigarettes, you have to sell their e-cigarette or something like that. There's some contract with the stores, is my understanding. Juul is the only one that's separate, and since it has 70% of the youth market right now, it's the most popular. And so if it's possible to ban the sale of Juuls, that also might be helpful.
There's another piece of information I forgot to tell you. We do have a locked cigar sales at the Sundance Drug and Liquor, and they have to have a separate license, they told me, for that. I don't know how that affects, nobody has, but they have a locked case that people have, the attendant, the retail worker has to go and unlock the cigar case and have them take it to the, so.
So how do we handle, let's use Clark's Market as an example, where some of the clerks down there on the register are 15, 14 years old,
Yeah.
you know? Brian, I don't know what kind of training is there any current training for any of these retail people that?
Not for cigarette sales.
Right. And, some of those kids down there, I mean, they're in high school themselves, and it's almost like if you're going to handle liquor, if you're going to distribute drinks as a waiter or a waitress, I was assuming you have to be 21 years old. Isn't that correct?
18, as long as you have a supervisor handy that's 21. You know, you could in your ordinance put you have to be 18 to sell cigarettes for a retailer as part of the
So
license. So you could restrict
we need to look
the
at,
sale to adults, and
That's a
that's.
good idea.
okay, because some of these kids.
No, I agree. I mean, especially that store. I don't know that Sundance actually pretty much works with adults, but.
Right,
but
right.
Clark's does offer
Clark's, I mean, there's some
abilities
young
for young
kids in
kids
there
to.
that are,
yep.
they're-
Selling cigarettes? They weren't.
They do not.
They're not one of the four that they talked about, but, I mean, the point is well
Express
taken.
does.
yeah,
The
Clark's
point,
Express does.
But they don't have any kids working at
Clark's
Clark's
Express.
Express.
Yeah,
right.
Regular Clark's doesn't. Yeah,
regular Clark's
I
does
don't
not.
buy cigarettes. I'm not even sure where.
Well, they must have stopped selling it because I
Well, no, Village Market sold them.
Right,
And when
okay.
the change came in all of the layout down there, one of the perks for Barb was to be the only person in town between her and the drugstore, or the grocery store that can sell cigarettes.
But I'd like to see the age limit of the retail person be raised, and who's going to sell the cigarettes to, 14, 16-year-old can sell to another 16-year-old. I don't think there's a whole lot of control there. Not that I see, but I don't see them exchanging cigarettes down there like they used to at Village Market, but,
Well, I guess, to me, it's a point, Risa, that you made before, that it's, potentially there are more 18-year-olds in high school that can, buy or get cigarettes for their younger friends. But if you put an 18-year-old in a position of being able to sell the cigarette, behind a counter, I think that's a lot of pressure for an 18-year-old when his buddy comes in who's 16 and wants to buy cigarettes. I think, I think you're heading in that direction,
right,
Tom,
right.
that if possible, if it seems practical, to have the ordinance say that you have to be 21 to sell cigarettes.
Well, let's talk about what Costco does, not on cigarettes, but on alcohol. If the person who's ringing at the counter is not 21 or older, they have to have the supervisor come over and
Come
check
over.
the driver's license and check their age.
That would seem acceptable, too.
So you got a 21.
And that takes the pressure off the 18, that takes the pressure off the 18-year-old.
Year-old or a 16-year-old behind
Or
the
the,
counter.
the 18-year-old or the 16-year-old behind the counter. Yeah. And maybe that's another way to handle it.
I agree. I think we just have to control the sale of the product, and once we control the sale of the product, there might be more discrimination in regards to checking the driver's licenses and so on, and see how old the people are that are buying it.
So there seems, you're talking about the person selling, I think. Alyssa, are you in support of that?
That they should be over 18?
Or I've said 21.
Yeah, or somehow, I mean, I don't know how you create that system you're talking about where it then dings the supervisor that they have to come over and check it.
Yeah, that's what they do at Costco.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as there's
And
some
they have
sort
to
of,
go in and do an X on the cash register receipt.
yeah, I mean, I think as long as there's some kind of check, whether it be that they're, I mean, I don't know how many of these places actually employ people that are under the age.
Or have supervisors on
Right,
at all times.
right. I don't know, I
It's
mean,
one thing for Costco to do that if they're staffed.
Yeah.
Well, that's a question we should ask.
Ask
Ask the
A
retailer.
retailer.
I mean, it certainly seems when you go into Sundance that those people are well over mid-20s.
They have to be 21 to serve in not a they can be 18 in a restaurant or not even in a tavern, in a restaurant with 21 supervision, but and they are, Sundance is a drug and liquor store license. So they have to be 21 to sell the liquor. So they're not, given the business, they're not gonna have somebody on this register 18 and somebody 20.
Right.
Everyone there is
It's
over
gonna be
21.
21.
And probably Reed's Place is the same thing.
Reed's Place is the same way.
Yeah, because it's a liquor store.
Right.
So what we don't know about is
The Clark's Express.
Clark's Express.
They're usually over 21 only
Yep.
because they're the more experienced people that are going
But
up because they're
you
by
could-
themselves.
You could mandate that in your
Ordinance.
ordinance.
And then they can find their own way to comply.
Yes.
If that's the goal, I mean, we can put that in.
Different places have done it differently. It's just specific to where you are. Basalt kept the age at 18. I think the retailers there, like City Market, employ a lot of people under the age of 21, and they were concerned about, who's going to be their staff. And so they kept it at 18, but I think other places have made it 21.
I just don't think it's our problem, if it's 21, then guess what you do as a company or a store? You find someone 21 and older.
Yeah, I know in Avon when they were discussing
Brian,
this.
how do we get rid of the vending machines? What's the process to?
Pick them up, put them back of a pickup truck.
Okay. Okay.
You just
I
put it in
mean,
the ordinance.
I mean, you just put
agree.
it in
I
the
think
ordinance and
They're
you-
definitely a problem.
You just have two, as far as I know, just two bars that have, I can't believe there would be a ton of pushback. It's a convenience thing more than it is a huge moneymaker. I don't know, but I would just say they'd be gone.
Pick them up.
Yeah.
Reed's Liquor Store is right next to the two restaurant bars that sell the cigarettes, so it's a short walk for those with good lungs and just,
And those with good lungs are
sorry, am I
looking to
sarcastic?
smoke.
So what other suggestions might we have on ordinances? Because I do want to be mindful of clock management.
I mean, if you guys are supportive, and it sounds like you are, let us draft something up. We can put these provisions in here. I think we need to work a little bit on the licensing, just learning this a little bit. If we can maintain the tax revenue, that'd be great. I don't hear a whole lot of concern if we lose $15,000 a year on it. We can't add a tax. That is not an option for us right now. That's a November Tabor restriction. And basically, we can talk you through Tabor later, but that is not an option for us right now.
But we could do it in 2020.
Yes, or even 19, I believe, in November.
Okay.
But, but we could work through that, but in the meantime, we can develop an ordinance and bring it back to you for
I
consideration.
think there's consensus, support?
Yes,
Yeah, I mean,
yes, you
yeah.
have my support.
I mean, you feel we should have a licensing requirement like,
Yeah,
I think, I mean, it's,
And if we can work through some of that detail, if we can have it
Oh,
all in
sure.
ordinance without a license and we don't lose tax revenue, that might be a great compromise. But if we need to have the licensing in order to enforce and we lose 15 grand, then that's just the way it is.
okay.
But let us do a little homework on that and find
let's
that out.
worry more about the health of the kids and $15,000.
Yeah.
And we'll figure out the best way to
Yeah.
enforce. Great.
Thank you.
Great work.
Thank you,
Thank you
Risa.
very
Thank
much,
you for the
Risa. Thank
presentation.
you.
Brian.
Welcome to
Brian,
the
thank you.
community.
Thank you.
You going
Rhonda?
up there now, Brian? You want to borrow my truck?
Just go move them right away.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, and
Thank you
we'll
so
also
much.
keep you posted as
So
things
glad
come
that
up.
you're here. Welcome
Thank
to
you.
Colorado.
Well, thank you so much for hearing it
Yes.
today.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Okay, next item is Building 6 update. And Andy and Michael are here.
That's why Pat Kiefer just sent an email like 5 minutes ago.
Who did?
Pat Kiefer about Building 6, so
Oh.
you guys might want to look at it.
Okay.
I mean, literally.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
I said Pat Kiefer sent an email at like 4:56 PM about Building 6. I'm just saying you might want to look at it because it's pertinent to this discussion. I mean, take it for what it is, however you want to read it.
I'll let you give us information as we talk it through if there's something in there.
But it has specific things.
Sure it does.
I'm sure it does.
I don't know. I don't read email during the meetings. I really try. There's about 6 hours a month where I really got to focus in this room, and I try not to read
Well,
other
it's
emails.
funny because my email hasn't been coming through, but then it came through and up it popped.
Yep.
So,
It's here.
So,
wanted-
you want me to go ahead and get started on this one, or? This is a work session. Everybody knows Andy Gunion. Everybody, I think, knows Michael Miracle, but just in case, Michael Miracle is, I love the title that was been, I don't know if it's been bestowed on you or you used, but I'm certainly using, is the executive on loan from SKICO to Snowmass Discovery. Snowmass Discovery is the nonprofit, not to be confused with Ice Age Discovery. And SKICO has loaned Michael's time to that nonprofit to help get it up and going and operational, and I'll let him talk to that in a few minutes here, if that comes up. Travis and me, anyhow. So in September of this year, Andy was here with me, and we gave the council a brief update on what was going on with Building 6. I won't read through the whole staff report, but they were recruiting a food and beverage operator, hiring an interior designer, working with Snowmass Discovery on getting some design issues put together, developing a lease, and getting a plan for some temporary activities going on in that building for this upcoming ski season. I'll let Andy in a few minutes talk to some of that detail, but I'm happy to report there's progress been made on all those issues. An F&B operator has been, they're working with an F&B operator right now. An interior designer has been selected, Simple Brown. We've had a couple of design meetings already trying to work through the issues. Snowmass Discovery has engaged with exhibit designers. I don't know that they're under contract yet, but they've certainly been attending meetings and working through a bunch of design issues. And then the big issue for tonight's discussion is a lease has been developed. There's been a number of iterations, and we think we're to a place where we're 95.5%, 99%. We're really dang close, we think, to having a lease that represents the letter of intent that was executed earlier this year. There's been a few small tweaks here and there, but all in all, that letter of intent is being held to, and the lease reflects that. So all that said, you know, the big picture, the town will that Building 6 has received its CO. It's complete to the requirement of the PUD. In the near future, the town will actually own it. And then what this lease would do is, once the town owns it, we would lease it back to East West. They would operate the building, 3/4 of the building, say, with a restaurant, a flex space, and a game lounge. The other quarter of that building would be operated by Snowmass Discovery, with some design issues they're working through. And with any luck, the town will contribute the dollars that we have received from the developer, and refund some building fees we received. Invest that back in the building, along with East West's $2+ million that they're investing in the building. And with any luck, we'll have a very successful community-type center next to an ice rink that'll bring vibrancy to Base Village.
Has John gone through the lease?
I've gone through an early version.
Okay,
There's been a couple of tweaks.
okay,
Exhibits aren't quite there yet.
okay.
So what our hope is tonight is, if the lease is largely acceptable, there are some things that need to be updated with the exhibits. Our hope is to get a level of comfort from the council tonight, get some direction from you, and then hopefully bring this lease back. What did we say, the 3rd?
Yes.
I should have read that closer. I think December 3rd, in a few weeks, for final action by you all.
Okay.
With that, Andy, I don't know if you want to jump in or say something that I might have
Yeah,
skipped over.
I don't want to repeat what you've said, but Andy Gunion with East West. And I think you probably saw this in a newspaper press release, but we've renamed, we were previously working with the name Village Hall, which was a fine working name, but we've now hired a couple people that are focused a lot on this building. And one of them is our curator of Village Experience, Sarah Halferty. I was hoping she could make it tonight, but her daughter's sick, but she's amazing and is coming up with lots of ideas for this. And so she came up with the name of The Collective, which we think is a great name. And from a trademark standpoint, it's the Snowmass Collective, because the collective was already copyrighted by somebody else. But so that the official name's the Snowmass Collective. But my thinking and my hope is most people will just call it The Collective. If you're in Snowmass, you already know where you are. And we have a logo built for that. I should have brought the image of that so you could see it, but I'll bring that next time. Yeah, on the lease, I hope we're getting close. We've gone back and forth. One of the exhibits is pretty critical in that it defines how the community flex space gets booked.
Okay.
And we've tried to keep that fairly simple so that it's not this convoluted process, but the long and short of it is that we expect one of our representatives, probably Sarah, to meet with one of the town's representatives on a regular basis, and whatever event requests they have in front of them, they'll just hash it out. And if they come to a point of disagreement of, well, I want this event, but it's scheduled at the same time as this other thing, then we tried to define some very general rules of how those disagreements would be solved. But I don't expect there would be many of those. And frankly, if there are, it's a good problem because it means we have lots of stuff wanting to come into that building, which is exactly what we all want. So I think we're in pretty good shape on the lease. As Clint said, tried to stay pretty close to the LOI, but we are now engaged exclusively with one local food and beverage operator. We don't have a final lease signed with them. We have a non-binding kind of business term sheet set forth. So I'd like to hold off on announcing that publicly until we actually have a definitive lease, and hopefully that's soon. But as we've developed the business deal with that operator, because that becomes a sublease effectively to the lease we're doing with the town, we've had to modify some terms in our lease with the town just to mesh it up with the food and beverage operators' requirements. The most significant being our original deal that we outlined with you guys in the LOI was that our term would be for one initial 5-year term and then a 5-year extension. But the food and beverage operator needs a third extension, so it'd be like a potential 15-year term. That's probably the most significant deviation we've made from the LOI. But I think, I mean, from my standpoint, if it's an operation that's working well and supporting the economics of the building, then hopefully that's something you guys would want in there for another 5 years. But that's the most material one. I guess this is more of a legal one, but the original LOI contemplated us leasing the whole building and then subleasing the Discovery piece back. But that was going to result in yet another legal document that we'd all have to deal with of, now we have a sublease to Discovery. So we agreed to try and simplify it and just say, well, why doesn't East West just lease the 3/4 of the building that's not Discovery, and then the town would just work out a deal directly with Discovery so we can avoid that complication. So I don't think that materially changes the setup. It's just more of it's a simplification on the legal front, I'd say.
I was going to ask you if I noticed that in this revised lease, who does the cleaning and all that good stuff and handles all the utilities? And you handle the utilities as part of the CAM, right?
So the PUD agreement calls for the Master Association, BVCO, future owners only, no existing owners, through some type of special assessment to future owners. They will pay for what's defined as operating costs in that agreement, which is all utility costs, plus the dues that building would otherwise have to pay to the Master Association. So those two costs get covered by future owners through the Master Association. But all the other costs, like bathroom cleaning and washing windows and keeping the space clean, those are costs that we'll have our property management company do all that stuff, and then they will bill this Building 6 LLC, whatever it ends up being. And then what we would do is prorate those across the uses. So let's say a window costs $100 to clean or whatever. The East-West operation within there would pay for 3/4 of that, give or take. And then the Discovery operation would pay for 1/4. So we would just allocate it based on square footage.
Andy, coming back to the LOI and the original concept of East West taking the whole building and then leasing it back. One of the points, I guess, that was made during that LOI was that if if, for whatever reason, Discovery wasn't there, that East West could take over that additional portion of the building in some fashion. When East West would have been the primary tenant, that would have flowed very easily, right?
Right.
Now that East West would not be the primary tenant if something happens to Discovery, would East West still be sort of, would you still be willing to look at that piece? And is that something that we ought to put into the lease, that maybe give you right of first refusal on that piece?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought through that scenario, to be honest with you, either in the old structure or in the new structure. But I think if our operation in Building 6 is going well, and there's another kind of synergistic use that can be put in there aside from Discovery, we'd definitely be open to looking at that. I don't know off the top of my head what that would be.
The lease does say that. I mean, there's nothing to prohibit what your example that you just used. There's nothing in the lease to prohibit that from happening.
No, I know that, but
There's nothing
rather than,
proactive to
I'd
make it
like to
happen.
be, that's all. I'm asking if we could, we could agree to be a little more proactive on it, that's all.
Yeah, we could add something in there
Yeah.
to that effect.
Yeah.
It basically,
And hopefully it's looking at Michael.
Well, yeah, hopefully it's a non-issue, but I honestly have real problems about who's gonna be paying for that, to build out that space. I mean,
Well-
if our $350,000 that we've committed, the town is committed, if that is to finish out the space to sheet rock, then that's a long way from being able to have exhibits and have a reasonable operating museum, for the lack of a better term. So I'm concerned that where the money's gonna come from to get from sheet rock to, fully exhibit. And there's nothing in this lease that shows me where that's coming from.
Agreed, and that's why this lease, I mean, is specifically between East West and the town.
Right.
And then there's that one quarter that we're still be working through with Snowmass Discovery. And your observation's right, that we don't have that roadmap developed yet, exactly how Discovery's going to get from the drywall finish that it is today to something better than that or cooler than that. But that's why I think, and I don't want to speak for Michael, there has been engagement with these designers, and they're gonna hopefully, we plan for them to develop that vision that can be sold and hopefully make that roadmap going forward done. But that's separate. I guess my larger point is.
No,
that
I
is
don't wanna
separate
get,
aside
I don't
from
wanna
this.
get hung up on this piece, but, as the lease, well, as we've talked about before, the construction for the interior of the building goes forward in the spring for finalization through into November, December for ski season of 1920.
Correct.
Now, this lease doesn't include that portion for Discovery. So, in my opinion, it's unlikely that Discovery is gonna be ready to go with exhibits by November, December of 2019. So what we might, as a community, we're gonna be looking at a 3/4 operating building. And that's a problem for me.
I mean, that's one option that could happen. The other thing we could have a phasing. What we've talked about is, and we haven't, these are still
Yeah, I know.
issues being worked
Yep.
through. But if we got that Discovery portion to a finish of, hardwood floors and lights, so it looked much more finished, would the town's money get us to that? And so that, Joe Citizen walking through wouldn't know that it was a 3/4 building, but know that, hey, there's a finished product, and then what we've got operating on the mall now, Ice Age Discovery, being moved down. Is that the right thing to open up with something maybe less underwhelming than a new facility? Those are the issues that we're trying to work through. And
it's-
when we talk about fundraising and how does that help Ice Age, that's the stuff that we're trying to work through now.
Okay.
And we've talked a lot about this exact topic with the designers. Because it's a chicken and the egg thing. We need to design and build the space, but we
I
don't know
understand.
how much money Discovery's gonna have for programming. And the thing I keep coming back to is, even if Discovery had $2 million today, I think everyone agrees that the Discovery space, and Michael, feel free to disagree if you do, but should over time evolve, that it shouldn't just have static stuff. And so if that's the case, then even if it had $2 million in the bank today, you would still want to build a flexible space that could accommodate different things over time. And so if that's the case, then it seems appropriate to me that we can design that flexible space today. And as Clint said, it may be that phase one is kind of, as a worst case scenario, you're just moving your existing exhibits down, and then it can build from there and evolve from there. But we've debated, like, should we be holding off design on Discovery because we don't know exactly what it is yet. But I just keep coming back to, it feels like it needs to be fundamentally a flexible space, so it doesn't necessarily scare me to move forward with it now with that premise. And there's also been a lot of discussion about how the game lounge and Discovery can integrate.
Yeah.
And are we gonna have like these two segregated spaces, that this is Discovery, this is Game Lounge, or is there some creative way to blend the two? And in that situation, if the initial phase of Discovery doesn't have the full exhibitry in place, are there Game Lounge components that can kind of bleed into there? And then as Discovery builds out and fundraises and gets more exhibits, the game piece pulls back and the two can kind of flex, but that gets very tricky. But those are all the discussions we've been having with the designer.
Well, it definitely seems to make sense to me to be working on designing the game space and the Discovery at the same time, so that if there are opportunities to integrate the spaces, the designer, the same designer is kind of working on them and can see what they are.
Right.
Michael, since you're so oriented to the Discovery Center, what do you see as the picture going on with Discovery Center, and where are we?
Well, I think as Bob is making clear, and I think is obvious, that there's the missing piece up to now has been the sort of, what is it gonna look like? I mean, you
Right.
keep hearing people alluding to, well, until we know what it's gonna look like. And we have engaged this team who is in the business of designing compelling museum spaces. One half of them has worked with Ian Miller from the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. They've done good, cool stuff. And, it's just like, unfortunately, that's just happening now. The good news is that they've already had meetings with Semple Brown. We had them up for dinner. We had a big dinner, all of us together, to connect them and get them just thinking about how it might work. But what's it going to look like? That's what they're going to give us. Or what could it look like? What is the range of potential things it could look like that they're tasked with giving us? And to answer Clint's question, the contract hasn't been signed yet. They're working on good faith right now, because that has to be a Discovery board decision. That's not something that John Rigney or I can just decide on our own, so that should be happening very soon. But we've made it clear to them that they can work on good faith and confidence that they'll be activated. They've already met with Ian Miller, who's on the Discovery board, again, from DMNS. So it's happening as it's on a fast track, starting 10 days ago, basically. And hopefully we'll see something from them, within a month or so. And, what they're gonna give us is finally that concrete thing that says, here's the narrative of the space, and here's how the guest might flow through it. Here are some illustrations of what might be where. Again, working with Semple Brown. The Denver Museum has its game room 50 feet away from one of its, its sort of most interesting exhibits with the science on the sphere there. So, I wish I had that thing to throw up on the screen for you now, but I don't. But the good news is that we've got the right people working to give us that thing.
And once you have that, then fundraising becomes far easier.
Part of what they're going to give us is sort of a fundraising roadmap
Okay.
that would sort of line up next to the building roadmap.
okay.
And so again, we've made it clear to them that those two things, you know, we could easily find ourselves pursuing a design plan and then, you're out of money. And so they're in the business of helping with that too.
It's a dual track then.
Yes.
Yeah, their scope is exactly, it's
Yeah.
two-pronged scope. One of it is working closely with Simple Brown to try and design this basic flexible space that we'd like to start building in April. And then secondly, to create that package, that vision package that helps with fundraising. And as Michael said, we had a great full charrette kickoff session with them probably a month ago now, something like that, maybe not quite a month. And then we're having weekly design calls with Simple Brown, and part of that, each week, part of that call is dedicated exclusively to the discovery piece. And a lot of the times we start talking about funds and all these things, we get distracted. So we just had the exhibit designers and Simple Brown did just a designer on designer meeting last week to really brainstorm creatively. And then this week we're going down to Denver on Thursday to meet with both of them in person to kind of see what they came up with. So I think hopefully shortly we'll have some good conceptual floor plans of how these two spaces can integrate.
I understand it's early in the design process, but in the lease it says the public restrooms will be open 365 days. Are they accessed through the discovery space?
There's two sets of restrooms. There's a few on the lower level, and then there's larger restrooms on the upper level. And it's the upper ones serve dual purpose. They serve this building, and then they also serve the plaza.
Mm-hmm.
And so those, I think, those are the ones that would be open 365. And we still
But the
need.
ones on the lower level are through the discovery space?
Mm-hmm. There is a side door there, but my preference would be just to have the upper ones be the ones accessed from the outside, and the interior ones would be used probably if you're downstairs, whether you're in the discovery or the game lounge, or if the two are kind of one thing, you're using those restrooms down there.
Right. And is the idea to have a partition between the two?
Between
the game room and the discovery?
That's something we keep debating, like should there be a hard barrier, should the two merge together? So I think we'll learn a lot more about that on Thursday when we go down and see what they came up with.
Okay, great.
I don't know if this is a question for John or for you, Andy, but what's the purpose of defining the building as a planned community?
Good question.
It's right, it's like the
right there,
first thing
yeah.
in the,
Right.
it's right in the first page of the lease. It's right after the definition of the premises.
I can
So
give you
it's-
my brief layman's explanation, or John, you may have a better one. So as our attorneys have described to me, there's three ways you can create a legal thing, a legal piece of real estate. One way is subdivision. A second way is doing a condominium regime like you would do with a residential building. And a third way is this planned community. And our attorney says that typically when you have kind of a single owner building like this, it's most efficient to do it through this planned community. It could be set up as a condominium regime, but I think the way it's being set up is there's really just one owner, which is the town of this. So our attorney's recommendation was to keep it simple, is just to do this planned community setup.
I mean, the idea of that's the only way you could own a building, I mean, it just, you have a deed of sale, you have a title, and you own the building. I mean, so there's got to be something more.
Well, it's really a way, it's an exemption in the Kiowa to subdivision, okay? So this takes this out of, not the overall, but this is actually the second planned community that's going to be created within Base Village. There's gonna be another one that has 2 units in it, and that's the gondola and then the ski corral. And they're gonna be owned by, I believe, I'd have to check this one because it's still in the works. But these are simple ways, because of the exemption provided, to get done when you do, because you don't wanna have to, I mean, you're gonna own the building, so you don't wanna have to go through a whole subdivision process through you at that expense just to have this building be separate. Okay?
Oh, so it's a way of keeping Building 6 separated from the other buildings in Base Village?
No,
The way I understand it is it's one building, and it allows us to lease 3/4 of the building to east-west, and we maintain control of 1/4 of the building.
Okay.
without having to create a condominium regime.
You're right that at the end of the day, it's as simple as we need to hand you a deed. But before I can hand you a deed, I need something to hand you a deed for. So it's creating the legal real estate.
Well, the deed we get's for the whole building. It's for us to lease back to you and say, here, you get 3/4 of it to
Yeah.
operate.
To have a definable interest in the land for them to
Right.
deed to us is what this does, and there's an exemption there for certain purposes of the building. And before it didn't qualify, and now it will.
And there's nothing magical about that method other than it's the simplest, and for this purpose, the way our attorneys have described it, it's the most fitting. Like if you did a condo regime, that's another way to do it, but then you have to draft a whole set of condominium HOA documents.
I mean, the second half of that paragraph talks about condominiumizing.
Mm-hmm.
Which, so is that, so to speak, part 2 of another is that the other option and the lease just allows for the landlord to create this other option?
I would have to read that section, but my guess is the way, I don't have it in front of me, but I think you guys as the owner of the building in the future have the ability to create additional condominium units within it. So if you decided later you wanted to create a separate unit for the restaurant and do something different with that. So I think that as the owner of the building, it gives you the flexibility to kind of divide it up in the future if you want to.
Gotcha.
Are we just asking questions about the lease?
Yeah, whatever, or anything within any of the documents. for
Okay.
Building 6.
On page 71 of 106 in the lease, it's also page 8.
Yeah.
In the top paragraph, it says, landlord agrees to limit the use of the Discovery Center to Ice Age discovery information, education, climate science education, and town information purposes. Why is there limits in there?
And but then it goes on, other significantly different uses of Discovery shall be the subject prior to written consent. And the idea was, when we debated this, they're pumping $2 million into it, and they'd like to make sure that we're doing something high quality in that area that we're gonna continue to control. And that was our concession, to say, we will limit it to Ice Age and information type discussions, and if for some reason, worst case, it doesn't happen, we'd go back and get the, which consent shall not be, we'd go back and get consent to do something different. But it gives them the ability to control
Yeah,
quality.
yeah.
Does that allow the Discovery Center to use its space as event space?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
it says it later in there.
Well,
that
it
any-
actually, I think it doesn't say, it
does.
intends to
does.
say it later,
No, it does.
But
It
it
talks
uses-
about all the 3 areas and
Yeah.
how they can be used for events.
but it uses the term premises. It says that the premises can be used for special events, and then the restaurant is the caterer of, has right of first refusal. But the premises does not include
No, but then it
Snowmass
goes on later
Discovery.
to talk about the 3 areas. I remember because I read it.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
I gotta-
maybe it's in a different place than I.
It's,
I know it's
it
in there.
is in 2 different places.
Yes.
That is certainly the intent.
It's
Okay.
definitely,
Well, as
because
long as
I've
it's,
had that
as long as
too.
it's the intent, if,
Bob, I had the same thing too, and then I saw it
Okay.
later, and I was like, oh, it does say that, because it was in my notes.
so I do have let's see.
I had a question, and it's about the hours.
Without even asking, those are the minimum hours that we've got in there. They don't all line up, but we tried to just put the minimum hours, hoping that there could be more extended hours applied once the demand is shown and whatnot, but we just put
Because we
minimum
had
hours.
always envisioned that the restaurant space might be able to serve
Breakfast.
coffee and, hot chocolate and stuff in the morning.
I'll let Andy speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we hope happens, but breakfast is tough in Base Village. I had the same thing. I really wanted to do like a cafe type thing, but I mean, the Viceroy has its own breakfast, which is great. And so most of those hotel guests are gonna stay there. The Limelight does an amazing free breakfast for its guests, so any breakfast joint's not really gonna get any business there. And then,
But it's so daunting when you tell people that have just dropped off their kids at ski school, they have to get back on the Skittles or
Go
take a
back
bus
up.
back up.
To go get
I
a
mean,
cup of coffee.
Get a cup of coffee, grab a burrito, whatever it is. I mean,
Yep.
there should be something. I mean, I know that,
They have a pop-up or something.
well, Scott was offering
Yeah.
the stuff. I don't know if he's still doing that. But it is a very, like, people are like, I have to go back up. I was just up there. Maybe they were staying at the Westin or wherever. So it really would be nice to be able to offer something.
yeah, it's something I hope happens, but I haven't found an operator yet that is willing to lock into that.
I have a good idea. Open up your sales space and serve coffee and donuts.
Yeah. Well, some of the new spaces we're opening, like Mawa's Crepes, I think she plans to offer coffee,
Okay.
but her minimum hours, I mean, she's not gonna agree to be locked into breakfast because she doesn't know if she can make any money with it. So again, hopefully, if the demand's there, I think these restaurateurs will start providing it. I just haven't been able to like lock somebody in to, you must provide breakfast. But hopefully, as the village gets more vibrant, it will just naturally happen, but it's difficult.
Well, can you put in this agreement, can we put some sort of like reevaluation thing that basically says that, recognizing that it may be difficult to get an operator to provide breakfast, but then after maybe the first year, they'll reevaluate because I do think it's really important.
Yeah.
And I do think that it should be a priority. And I'm just wondering if there's a way to, why are you laughing at me, John Dressner?
I thought Marky was gonna say, I know what you should do, put in a waffle wagon, but that would
We already
just,
been there,
that
done
would
that.
just date Marky and I, and so,
We've been there. Put in the biscuit truck.
well,
The biscuit is
Say we.
phenomenal.
the town has approved many or several iterations of coffee wagons, waffle wagons. The first operator in the Red Barn tried it, and what Andy says is there just aren't enough people that want that. You see it, if you're stationed as an ambassador in front of Treehouse, you're gonna see them drop it off and go, oh, I need a cup of coffee. But it's hard to stay open when you sell that occasional cup of coffee, and the town has encouraged that long before East West was here, and it's.
We'll keep pushing for it. I just don't know that I
And
can
that's-
make a
that's-
requirement.
That's the point I'm gonna close with, is when there is a residential density that goes up there, which is what we've been striving for since the beginning, that's when it would happen. And so saying in 1 year that we wanna reevaluate that, but then what do? You say in 1 year, we're gonna reevaluate it, and they're gonna say it doesn't happen, and what, are you gonna terminate the lease at that point? I mean.
No,
you're-
I'm just saying it just forces you to just keep thinking about it. That's all I was saying.
Now, wait a minute. Doesn't Clark's Express, isn't it open?
I don't know what their hours are, to be honest with you. I need to go look.
Oh, darn it, because that could be a perfect location. With their other stuff
And one of the challenges with that, Frank, I know this is something that was debated long ago, but with the way the buses drop off, if you look at the statistics of how many people are coming off of buses to Base Village in the morning, on an average day, it's like 50 people, 50. And you got, 1,500 dropping at the mall. So for a breakfast business, you'd basically be relying on people that are not staying in the Limelight, not staying in Viceroy,
Right.
that are driving into the garage that haven't already eaten, or people that came down for ski
Right,
school,
but
like
it
you
could
said.
all change when you have an arrival center and a
True.
more attractive place at the base. I
Yep.
mean, the other reason why you have that happen, and I've said it 5 million times, is because the RAFTA bus drivers tell everyone to get off the bus. And they don't tell them they can stay on to go to Base Village. That is a major reason why that happens.
Well, you know, there is an answer, and that's at the Limelight. They serve an awesome, wonderful breakfast. Grab a cup of coffee at the Limelight.
Yeah, but isn't it free if you're a guest?
It's free,
Free for
it's
your
part
guests.
of the hotel
But
guest.
you can't eat there if you're not a guest?
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't think you can.
Yeah, I'd have to ask Skiko.
I just know that
We've
I've
asked,
done it.
you can, they don't advertise it.
Yes.
It's not a service they try to
I
advertise.
have done it over at the Limelight in Aspen.
People do it all the time.
Yes, they do. And then you give a big tip and give 'em-
I mean, if it's a
Let me check.
priority for the town, we could put a coffee cart in the Discovery Center. And I'm just trying to think about stuff
Sure.
that we can control.
And I think we'll learn a lot this winter and even more
Yeah.
the following winter about
Yeah.
how much activity is really gonna be here.
You're correct.
But again, we're aligned on this and that it's something we wanna see as well. I haven't been able to find an operator that's willing to lock into that yet.
So speaking about the operator for the restaurant, so they have exclusive right to the F&B for any event that happens in that building. You cannot bring an outside operator unless they decline.
That's right.
That's right.
Right. That's right.
What if it's like a, never mind, okay.
Andy, on that, in that same area, I guess it's on, if you want a page, it's page 72 of
Yep.
106.
See,
What's the, they don't have the
Are you
red.
talking-
It's on page 9
Page
of the 33.
Mhm.
Why is there, in describing who this restaurant sublease tenant would be, why is the word affiliate there? It says here, into a sublease with an affiliate of blank.
It has the restaurant owner's name there in the lease, and because they're trying to keep it confidential at this point, I removed that name from this version.
Yeah, but it's the word affiliate. I mean, why can't it just be the restaurant owner's name?
I think it's because when they actually go to set this up, they'll probably create an LLC, right, for this operation, but we'll make sure that it's owned and controlled by the person we're working with. But they're probably not gonna make it a sole proprietorship, right? They're probably gonna make it a single purpose LLC for this operation that they don't have identified yet, so.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm curious to know why the LLC was set up under a Delaware corporation.
Our LLC
Common.
as the tenant,
that's
Yeah.
common, very common.
yeah, it's, I don't fully understand. It seems like we set up some of our LLCs in Colorado and other ones in Delaware, and I don't understand
Because
why
of
we.
the tax issues.
Yeah,
the
it's
favorability of tax.
I can ask our attorney, but.
Why are you laughing?
Well, Delaware's a haven for corporate activity.
Exactly.
That's where you go.
That's where all my corporations are
Yeah.
set up.
So one more question on the restaurant. I just lost my place where it was. But it says, I guess it was under, I'll have to look for it.
You want me to
Oh,
ask?
here it is. It's on page 4 of the 33 or 67. It says that essentially it says that the lease for the restaurant space will be at 8% gross sales by year 3 of the sublease. So what happens in the first 2 years? What's the revenue stream there for the first 2 years?
Yeah, there's a ramp up to that percentage, and the stabilized percentage that we're negotiating with this operator is actually higher. It's 9%.
Okay.
And I should have that in front of me, but the deal with them is a staggered ramp up to get to that. So this may not be right, but it's probably like 7, 8, 9, something like that over the
Okay.
first few years, just to give them some runway to get going.
Okay.
And this is our minimum though, after year 3.
I understand. That of course ties into the the ability to terminate based on net profit or loss. So there is some, I guess, theoretical loss of revenue against the 8% minimum over those first 2 years. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm hoping that if 1 or 2% of the restaurant space revenue is not there in the first, by the end of year 2, that's not gonna spark a termination request. You know, if that's the revenue that's missing in the difference between profit and loss.
Yep.
But
I understand the question. Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at the economics and we've lost an amount equal to what the delta between our current rent and what that stabilized rent will be, at that point, we would say, okay, well, this will be break even once we get to the full rent.
I mean, it's clearly written that it's tenant's choice what to do in that situation, and there's no requirement one way or the other. But it just, you know, when I saw it, I just recognized that, oh, wait a minute, this is gonna this is gonna impact that
calculation.
net profit
Yeah, it will.
It will.
Hopefully, it's not a big impact, though, I would say.
Yeah, hopefully not.
In one provision, we talked about when does the clock start ticking on this issue? You know, when the restaurant's up and going, those types of issues. And East-West Credit, I mean, we've been very open about that discussion back and forth, making sure the clock, that 2-year timeline starts ticking at an appropriate, fair time, that those gaps, those theoretical gaps don't exist.
Yeah, because, one of the things we haven't talked about yet, but I think we talked about it last time, is that originally we thought we'd be under construction this winter, but since design has taken longer and now we're not going to start construction until April, we said, well, let's try and do some temporary stuff in the building. And so Sarah and Dawn have a bunch of stuff scheduled. Did you share that current schedule? And they're continuing to get more. But Clint brought this up and he said, well, that this first year, you know, we never originally contemplated doing this temporary stuff, so that should not count towards the 2 years of losses. Because I guarantee you this year it will be a loss because we have no revenue from any, well, we have the small outside bar, but it's going to be immaterial revenue. We don't have the full food and beverage to produce the revenue.
So, talking about the restaurant, so there's 2 parts. One is, you know, you've got the build-up to be successful. What happens if the quality control suggests that the food is substandard? Can we terminate?
I don't think we don't have like some hard and fast provision with that.
And it wouldn't be the town anyhow.
No, it would be East-West.
Right.
We haven't started drafting I shouldn't say it. We've started drafting, but we haven't produced the first draft of the actual lease with the operator. But we will put something in there. I mean, we need some controls as to what this operation is, so we can add something in there about some reasonable standards of quality. And that if those aren't being met, that would give a termination right.
Are you getting direction from the potential leasee about the build-out as far as hoods and those things that you wanted to hold off on?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're intimately involved in the design. Like this session later this week in Denver, they're coming down and we're going to tour a bunch of other Denver restaurants that are good precedents for this concept. And they've already downloaded a huge amount of information to Simple Brown about their requirements of here's how we want this line to lay out, here's where the hood needs to go, here's where the dish station goes. So that all that is happening quickly now.
Great.
Bob, page 10, under general, the first line talks about the spaces being for private events. That's where it was.
Yeah, but if
Spaces, and it defines spaces as those 3 different spaces.
Right, it doesn't include the Discovery Center.
Yes, it does.
As a space.
Yes, it
Yes,
does
it
right
does.
here.
Sorry, 4
And/or
different
Discovery
spaces.
Center, right there,
What, on that same page?
on page 10.
Yeah, right
73
above
and
it is
106.
Discovery Center. It mentions all the different spaces. It's just the thing, it says restaurant.
I see.
Flex
All right.
space, lounge
Yeah,
space,
it's
Discovery Center. And
Okay.
it says any of the spaces.
Yeah,
Um,
the lease is using two terms, spaces and premises.
Right, but the
And I think-
premises does
and I
not
think they're
include the
the same
Discovery
thing.
Center.
I think
It's
that-
confusing there. I think there's the property, which is the
Yeah,
whole building.
right.
And then there's the premises, which is the 3/4 we're leasing.
Right.
So if that's missing, I mean, we have no issue with.
Yeah, I
this.
know,
We
I
want
know.
Discover doing events, so if that's missing, we can definitely plug that in.
Thanks.
On page 15, the last paragraph, I'm just not really sure what's happening there. I don't understand if it's part of a previous sentence or it should be capitalized, or I'm just confused. Do you guys see what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
it starts with then landlord.
It starts with then, but
Yeah.
then isn't capitalized. And so I don't know if it was like a cut and paste issue that
I'd have to
is
look
a
it up.
I don't know, because I don't have the original to redline it to look, but something's not right.
What is the red one?
What?
78.
Oh,
78.
78?
78 of 106 or page 15 of 33, and it's the last paragraph. It says,
paragraph.
then landlord may. I just don't know what it's tied to.
It's to the B, if a mortgage or other person entitled to the.
Sounds like maybe just a legal cleanup. I'd have to look at it.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it was, because sometimes when you start moving things around, things get put out of place or it's copied extra. I don't know. But there's something wrong with that.
Yeah.
It needs to be looked at. And then
What section is that?
it's,
Section B.
It's under 12,
yeah.
12B.
12.
12B?
No, it's really under 12A.
12-4.
It's under 12A, damage to premises.
12-4B.
12.
It's really under 12.
It's 12-4B.
B, but it's very confusing.
Yeah,
There's
it's not
something
indented.
about the way it's formatted.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell what it goes
Yeah,
to.
it's
And then on page,
A, 4, okay.
Yeah, it's
where
just,
is
I think it's just a format issue.
oh, on page 7 or 70 of 106,
Okay,
the first paragraph in the middle, and it's talking about the modifications, material modifications to the building. And then it says landlord agrees to respond to tenant within 5 days following the request, or the request shall be deemed approved by the landlord. Is that a normal amount of time?
You know, this is what I have to go back to the heading of this one, but as I recall, they want the flexibility to make their investments in the restaurant as needed. And
Right.
so they need to get permission.
Right.
Because they're making investments, we didn't we felt we could make a response in 5 days, yeah.
Oh, this is for
Okay.
tenant improvements.
Yeah.
and improvements,
right?
it's not the
It's-
restaurant.
It's not the
It's
restaurant.
not our money, it's not, it's them
Right.
operating
No,
the
I'm
building.
just asking if that's
5 days?
Couldn't
acceptable
tell you
amount
if
of
it's
time.
standard or not, but we felt comfortable with it.
Okay, that's all I
Is it a
wanted to know.
calendar day or is it a business day?
It doesn't say that in here either.
Those are two,
Probably a day then.
a day,
Is
a
that for the,
business day.
is that for the initial build out, or that's for like
That's for
changes down the road?
tenant improvements.
Tenant improvements is all it is.
Which would, but those could be the initial build out or future.
Right, so if you need to change.
Well, I think it's only initial, because it says the approved tenant improvement plan.
Okay.
So we're talking about build out here. We're talking about you need to move if you find something that you
Right.
need to be changed. The town, the landlord understands that can't be unreasonably withheld, conditioned, or delayed. And then you define without limiting, it's acknowledged that that will be within 5 days.
Yeah, so if that's part of the
Business
initial
days or
build out,
calendar
it is important for quick feedback. 'cause
It's fine, I
yeah.
just I don't do this business. I don't know what's normal and what's
Well,
not
you
normal.
need to think about holidays, banking days.
Right.
So is it calendar days or is it business days?
It's
If
calendar
it's
days.
calendar.
Calendar days, okay.
So,
Can't
that's
take a
all.
vacation.
That was the only question I had about that.
Okay, guys, it's
I got one more.
almost 5 till 6.
I got one more.
One more.
So on page 68 of 106, or page 5,
Yeah,
on real property taxes,
yep, I got that one too, right here. Go ahead.
towards the bottom.
Yep.
It talks about, this paragraph talks about if the tenant wants to appeal, real property taxes, and they go ahead and appeal, or they go ahead and contest, and they should prevail in their relief, then it says the net benefit of the contest after the payment of expenses thereof shall inure to the benefit of the tenant. All of that sounds fine, except that in our net profit formulas,
It should go into that.
it should go into that because that would affect net
Yep.
profit.
And my guess is it technically does. I'd have to check the language, but I can double check that.
Yeah, but
Yeah, it should go into that.
Okay.
Okay, anything else?
Well, I just,
Okay.
that email that Pat sent that had some suggestions in there, I just think maybe you should look at it and, I mean, some of it's,
If you could
Normal.
if you forward it, we could look at it.
well, it went to council, so it
Well, that
should go
doesn't
to
mean it
you
goes
guys.
to Clint. No,
I didn't get it.
no, it
We
doesn't
can,
go to
we
them.
can look at it. I
I
mean,
thought it does.
Not all the time.
I get counsel to
Oh,
make
you
sure
get
they
counsel?
respond.
Yeah,
Okay.
If she's on the, like I said, I don't look at the emails.
I can
for
forward it
council
to you
meetings.
right now, but I'm just saying, I'll
Go
forward
and
it to you
address
and
it right
John.
now.
Thank you.
You're sending it, Mark?
Right
Okay.
here.
It just, there was a few things on there
There
that
goes.
Okay.
you should look at.
Oh, there was a question on liquidated damages under this remedies section on page 26 of 33. It lists liquidated damages shall be the amount equal to the present worth of the minimum rent and tenant CAM and taxes. And then it goes on a little bit, and then it says less the fair retail value of the premises. Well, this is in case, this is if the tenant leaves, and theoretically, the space is empty, so why would the fair rental value be deducted from the liquidated damages? I just didn't understand how that connected.
I'm not sure I can answer that.
I don't know that I can do that off the cuff. I'd have
No,
to
that's
reread that
okay.
one. I don't
And-
know.
and-
I'm sorry.
And that's fine, I
But we
mean,
can have
these are
John,
just,
we can have John follow up with Rick Travers,
these are
our
just
attorney.
kind of
It'd
things
be
to
really
look.
nice if I knew what page you were talking about.
26.
26 of the
26
contractor, 89 of the package.
33,
Okay,
89 of 106.
got it.
And it is the third paragraph
I got
under
it.
termination.
Okay, so if there's other questions, how about we send them over to John? Since he's the guy who's gotta really work through all the detail on this, right?
No, I think
Copy.
these guys are doing a fine job. You've just given them
I
a
am
lot
not
more
gonna cite
direction.
anything until I know that you've looked at it. Good work.
So our hope is we'll continue to arm wrestle a little bit, get some of these details ironed out, and then bring it back to you for consideration December 3rd.
It's around the corner.
It is around the corner.
Okay.
Michael, thank you for being here tonight, and
Pleasure.
Andy, thanks for
Andy,
taking some
thank you.
time
Thank
out
you
of
very
your
much, gentlemen.
Yeah.
busy calendar.
Thank you.
Thanks for the update.
Okay,
One more, huh?
good work. Is grant criteria?
Yeah, and I'll just, Ron put this together, but since I know we're in a hurry, I'll just talk really fast. The grant process is ready to go. The council approved $100,000 in the budget. Before we started advertising, we just wanted to double check that the council reviewed this 2 years ago, Ron? We just wanted to double check to make sure the criteria still stood and we could go forward with it.
Yeah, I had a comment.
Go for it.
It's not huge, but in that grant criteria in that paragraph, and/or needs a slash.
Yes.
You can't have it without a slash. I looked it up.
In the red you're talking about?
Yes,
Yeah,
in
it
the
should
red.
say
or
and
enrich
slash
the quality of
or.
life for residents of Snowmass Village.
It's incorrect.
So it's
the
just a
way it is.
typo, okay. I don't see it, but we'll find it.
It's in the last, like, 3 lines
Oh,
from the
yep,
bottom.
got it. Okay.
I just want to throw out just a thought. Now that now Healthy Communities has just been approved nice sizable tax increase. And we've had,
Isn't it not an increase? I thought it was just the continuation.
no, it's an increase and a continuation.
It's $160,000.
It was
It's
both.
an increase and a continuation.
It's $160,000, and there's millions of dollars of requests to come in.
Let me finish, please.
Oh.
The
I
the
remember
paragraph that the definition we've been using for the last 3 years, I believe. And because, there's no shortage, there are no shortage of nonprofits in the valley, and everybody is scratching for money. And I just wondered if we should move in a different direction, and either add something in addition to all the health and welfare verbiage that's in there, or replace it, frankly, for a couple of years. And
What are
I'm
you
just putting it
replacing it?
out there. I'm just putting it out
Like the
there.
arts organization has the huge Wheeler Arts Fund over in Aspen that every arts organization can apply for.
Well, how about environmental organizations?
Environmental can come through healthy community funds if you read the ballot language.
Yeah, but it can't come through our grant program. Our grant programs don't
As
cover.
long as they
I
deal
think
with,
everybody can apply
Yes,
for it, but
yes.
the Citizen Review Committee reviews against this criteria. So
Yeah.
if it was health, you said Healthy Rivers or environmental,
I said environmental, or,
if they were gonna be, I'm making it up, doing some inspection, they're gonna keep kids safer, I think they would review against that.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
this
what
is
you do.
pretty general criteria, having sat through 3 or 4 of these with Rhonda now. They tried, the committee really does try to stick to this criteria, and then they get to be realistic with the funds available and leverage to the greatest extent
And- and
possible.
Well, and it says enrich the quality of life.
yes,
So
that's where.
that's any community nonprofit that enriches the quality of life. That's what we changed it to
And
include Anderson
environmental would
Ranch.
likely fall underneath
It
that
it
if their
falls under
application was
there, it's
strong.
what it does in Healthy Community Fund too.
But
I don't quite read it that way.
what, you don't read it that way?
No. It says health and human agencies that provide a continuum of healthcare services.
Right, but this is the problem with the paragraph. This is the other thing that I wanted to bring up, is that it's confusing, because first you're talking about the health and human agencies that provide these services, right? But then it says, and community nonprofit organizations that address community problems and or enrich the quality of life. So it's covering two different things. The problem is, it's not worded correctly. I think regardless of the client's ability to pay, needs to go in like parentheses or something. Or, not parentheses, what do you call those things?
Parentheses.
Is it parentheses? But then, because you're not seeing that it's and.
It should be or.
Should be or.
It's not worded correctly, because it's making you think that you just have to be a health and human service agency, when really, you either have to be a health and human service agency or a community nonprofit that enhances the quality of life.
Right, right.
So it's not worded.
So
And
how,
that's, I think, Bob, what the problem is. It really is covering what you say it's covering.
so I would suggest, in the interest of time and how great you are at putting the right language, could you
I
put
couldn't even
something,
remember what these things were called.
could you rewrite this and send it out to all of your colleagues?
Sure.
To all of us?
I think if the last sentence was first,
Yeah.
you would probably
Yeah.
get to where you're going.
Yeah, let me play with it, and I'll
I think it'd be
email you.
wonderful.
Sorry, Rhonda.
So then, once we get this, should we hold off on advertising?
Well, it would probably
Let me
take
just-
less than
let me play
24
with it
hours
tonight.
for Alyssa to get done. And then we all need to watch our emails.
So then, what I'm gonna just do is, once I get some kind of informal buy-off from the council, then we'll just get it cranking.
Thank you for your willingness.
Well, it's been bothering me. I couldn't figure out what was wrong with it.
I think
Then I
that's-
figured it out.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's still not
clunky.
particularly clear
Right,
to me,
it's just-
but
it's a
okay.
little clunky.
Yes.
I'll wait to see what comes out of it.
Read what's in the Healthy Community Fund and how that language is, was very well done.
Are we done? Are we still?
Well, let's see, community potluck is Sunday. Hope you all can come.
I'll be out of town.
You're out of town. Tom,
Coming.
you're coming?
I'm counting on it, right
Okay.
at this moment, yes.
Okay. And
Are we judging this year?
the judging, Martha O'Keefe is, she and Julie Ressler are handling that part of it. I don't know who all, did they call you, Dresser?
No.
I know your name was on the short list because you've never
No
done
one will
it.
recognize him now that he looks all spiffy.
They called,
He looks like a prep school boy.
I think they called my wife while I was out of town, and she told them I was busy with other things.
Okay, they may have passed over. I know your name was on it because we wanted to get other people that haven't done it.
Yeah, I already judged one eating deal this year, and that's like my limit.
Wow.
What?
Was
Were
it,
you-
was it
were
a
you the
donut
chili-
contest?
Were you the chili
Community-oriented.
contest judge?
It wasn't the chili, it was a barbecue deal.
Oh. Moving on. Okay. Anything else?
Nothing else.
Nope.
I'm going to that rafter thing on Thursday, that,
Oh, the thing that you walk the trail?
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm walking the trail, not really, but just by drone.
It's really pretty neat with all the stuff the goats did.
Yeah,
And
I
that is
like
really
going to
neat.
that meeting. It's kind of fun.
That rafter ballot was very close.
All right.
Okay, anything? Yes, or anything? Everybody have a good Thanksgiving and,
Sorry I was late, guys.
yeah, you were a
We have-
copper.
We'll be back.
Do we have a meeting
Were you
next
working with
Monday, don't
Lindsay? I saw Copper, and I know she's skiing. Were you working with
Yes,
Lindsay?
we have a meeting
Can you
on
say
Monday.
that?
I wasn't, but
we?
my
Alyssa?